Hello. Today we are going to be talking about structure. I know for many people, creating a presentation, a speech, a talk, whether that's 5 minutes long or 50 minutes long or 5 hours long, can feel quite stressful and quite intimidating. So today we're going to talk about how we can use structure. The thing is, when you're presenting, your audience are putting themselves in your hands. You're literally holding them in that space for the amount of time that you're talking. It's a bit like, I always say to people, it's a bit like the mental version of walking into a room and sitting down and then the person switching out the lights and saying, trust me, I've got you. Now, depending on your relationship to them, to what's going to go on in that session, as in your relationship to the content, what's going on for you that day, emotionally, practically, what needs to happen, your personal agenda, that's going to depend on how you respond to that scenario. So we don't really want to be making people feel like we're switching out the lights on them and that they have to really lean into totally trusting you in that moment, because that's quite an ask of your audience. So we don't want to switch out the lights. We want to give our audience a roadmap. We want to make them feel safe and secure in your hands. They feel held whilst you're speaking. Now, it is really tempting not to use a structure, particularly if you feel like you know this particular area of your business or your job really, really, really well. It feels like it's going to take extra time that you don't have. And, you know, to be honest, you're only speaking for 5 minutes, so you don't really need to use a structure, do you? Yes, you do. Spoiler alert. Not having a structure, you are more likely to come a cropper than if you use a structure, and your message is less likely to land. So today we're going to look at 3 things. We're going to look at why you need a structure as a speaker. We're going to look at the 6 reasons why your audience will love you for using a structure and sticking to that structure. And I'm going to give you a really easy structure that you can use. It just has 3 elements to it. And you can use that if you've got a 5-minute speech to prepare, 50-minute speech to prepare, or you've got 5 minutes to actually prepare the speech, or 5 days. It doesn't really matter. So you can use this structure to expand or contract on the length of the presentation or speech that you are giving. Okay, so let's dive into the 6 reasons why you, as the speaker, will really benefit from using a structure. Okay, the first thing, and I've talked about this before, but I am in no way ashamed to talk about it again because it's really, really important. You are an expert in your area. Absolutely, definitively the expert, which is why this group of people that you are speaking to have asked you to talk. You know more than they do about this thing. So I want you to imagine that the circle of knowledge you have about your area is this vast, huge circle that surrounds you. This is all your knowledge from previous interactions with this material, your experience, your education, whatever it might be. It's all there. It is huge. If I put you in a room with another professional who had a similar area of expertise, you could probably talk for days about the stuff that you know, okay? Your knowledge, even if you're very junior, even if you're only just coming into the role, if you've just stepped up into a leadership role, still your knowledge is vast. What your audience need to know is probably about that much, right? It's a lot smaller. So if we don't have a structure, if you decide not to use a structure, there is a very high probability, I'm not going to say you will, but there's a very high probability that you will overwhelm yourself with all the things you think might need to go into this presentation. You're just like, oh, I'll just tell them about this and I'll add that bit in because it's obvious to you. It's clear to you. It's not complex to you because this is your area of expertise. So if you don't have a structure, the danger is you're going to overwhelm yourself with content to add into your presentation. And suddenly, you know, your slide deck is now 150 slides long, or your notes are now running into 8, 9, 10 pages of A4, and you've only got 5 minutes to present. So you're going to overwhelm yourself if you don't have a structure. There's also a danger that you are going to overwhelm your audience. And I'm using I'm using the word overwhelm here as a polite way of saying you're going to bore them. And boring an audience is just not really an option. We never want to bore them. We always want to be leaving them wanting to know more, to ask more, to be interested. We have to give them enough that they can make any decisions that they need to make, but we don't need to give them so much that they're feeling really, really overwhelmed. Stuffing your presentation is it's a symbol of trying to over-justify. You're trying to justify your expertise. You're trying to justify your knowledge. You're trying to justify your position. So if you're stuffing your presentation with too much in there, it's not because that needs to be in there. It's because you feel like you need to justify your smartness, your reason for having that role, your presence at the table to the rest of the people in that room. And actually, overstuffing any kind of content does exactly the opposite. It doesn't show up you as the expert that you are. Okay, so let's go and move on to number 2. Having a structure will help you create clarity of your message. What is it these people really need to know? What do they need to understand so that they can make a decision, or so that they can include that in the way that they're behaving, or they can explain it to their teams or their clients or their customers, whatever the reason. As if you have a structure, you will have a clarity of message. So today I'm telling you why you need structure as a speaker, why your audience are going to love you for having structure, and what that structure is. So I want you to go away at the end of today knowing why and what structure to use so you can make your messages clearer. So I could tell you so much about speaking. I could tell you so much about presenting, but I don't want to overwhelm you, and I don't want you to go away not knowing what to do. So if you have a structure, you're going to know where you are going personally as the speaker. You're going to know why you're going there. So what benefit is this to this particular audience? And it's going to help you make what I call neat decisions about whether that content needs to be in there or not. So I could think, I could tell them about vocal clarity, but actually that's not going to help you with structure today. I could talk about how we include tone and gesture, and when we combine those two things together, how we can create these nuanced messages. It's not going to help you with structure. So when you've got a very clear structure, it helps you be clear about what content needs to go in and what's extraneous. So again, it helps you to be, number 3, concise. So the structure helps you with clarity, but it also helps you be concise. So you're not waffling on around the houses, telling your audience things that you find amazingly interesting or that you think they ought to know, but actually isn't going to help them make a decision or understand the content that you are delivering to them. So having a structure helps you be concise. Nobody ever, anywhere complained about a presentation being too short, as long as it's insightful and informative. If it's just short and there's not a lot of content in there, we don't really get anything of value from it, it's not really helpful. As long as we're getting value, as long as we get content and insight, then we are going to be very happy that it's not too long. Okay, so number 4, what's the 4th reason you as the speaker need to use structure? Structure really helps keep your thoughts and your speech on track. It will help you stick to time. So if you're someone who persistently overruns, you're given 5 minutes, you talk for 7. You're given 10 minutes, you talk for 15. You're given half an hour and you don't get to your last 10 slides. If you're someone who persistently overruns, having a structure will help you keep to time. It also means you won't meander and get lost, because sometimes we've got too much content in there. We start drifting off over to here and we start talking about things that aren't completely relevant to the end goal. So we want to make sure that you don't wander off the roadmap and you stay where you are, you don't get lost. And you won't have any of those moments then when you're like, oh my God, I'm talking about this thing. Where do I go next? It also, and this is quite important, it also helps you deal with questions that come up when you're speaking that aren't completely relevant. So if you're very clear about where you're going, if you're very clear about your structure and somebody starts asking you about something over here, you can say to them, that's super interesting. It isn't quite relevant to what we're talking about today. Let's have a sidebar afterwards and come and talk to me afterwards and we'll go through that. It allows you to deal with interruptions and questions and get rid of the things that are going to impact on your time that aren't totally relevant. So what's the fifth reason you need structure as the speaker? Well, it's easier to remember and deliver your content if you've got a structure. If you've got just 3 little road marks on your map, or signs on your map, your roadmap, you know where you're going. So it's much easier for you to remember and deliver. Okay, so you stick to your roadmap, you know where you're going. It also means you're going to have less need for notes. So sometimes when we have too much in there, we feel like we have to have lots of notes so we remember all the tiny details, all the statistics, all the relevant pieces of information that we might want to be giving our audience. But actually, there's almost always too much. So if you've got a very clear structure, you know what your roadmap is, the chances are you won't need notes in the way that you feel you might need them at the minute. And then number 6, it's going to save you time. I know that sounds contradictory because you're like, well, I've got to think about time to make my plan, to give myself a structure. But it actually does save you time because you don't put things in there you don't need. You're not having to spend time making slides and then taking slides out, or putting things into your presentation and then taking out. It will save you time. It avoids over preparation and overstuffing your content. And it's really important to know that by reducing what you're putting in your presentation, it doesn't mean that you can't bring out more information if it's needed. So say a really relevant question comes up and somebody says, oh, but what about this? How does that impact on what you've just said? It's fine. You know the stuff, right? You've got it there. You understand it. You can just draw on that knowledge and answer that question. And then you look incredibly expert, competent, because you don't have it on a deck somewhere. You don't have notes there. It's just, you just know it. You're able to answer it. So never feel like you have to justify all your knowledge and put everything in the presentation or the structure, because you really, really don't. If somebody needs to know something more nuanced, more sophisticated, more in-depth, they will ask you. And then you can just draw on the knowledge that you naturally have because you're an expert in your particular area. Okay, so those are the 6 reasons why you as a speaker really, really need to use structure. Why do your audience need you to use structure? Well, it comes down to a form of psychological safety. Nobody enjoys not knowing where they're going, unless you're on holiday and you are wandering around. This is my thing. If you happen to be wandering around an amazing food market and you're just meandering and you're looking and you're enjoying the smells and you're just taking everything in, and it's just a purely indulgent, luxurious experience, then we can enjoy not knowing exactly where we're going, right? But we'll probably have our phone with a Google map so that we know we can get back to our hotel, or we know we can meet our family in that cafe over there, right? We will have some structure. But when you're in a business meeting, when you're in an organization, we don't like not knowing where we're going. It makes us feel unsafe. We like to know how long it's going to take us to get there and what we're likely to see and hear on the way. And the more you do that, the more your audience will feel that they can trust you, that you are credible, that you are confident. So make them feel held, make them feel like this is a safe space for them to be in. They know what's going on. They know what they might need to chip in with because what's relevant to their area of the business. It just helps them feel safe. So structure will give your audience psychological safety, as well as you as the speaker, as we talked about just a moment ago. And then it's going to save time. It's going to save time in the delivery. It's going to save time in the preparation, but your audience is concerned about the time in the delivery. So most people feel time poor. There aren't many people in the world who don't feel time poor. So treat other people's time respectfully. So tell them what you're going to do, tell them how long it's going to take, give them the structure, and then stick to it. And they will love you for it, literally love you. So those are the reasons why your audience needs structure from you. Now, I promised you that I would give you a simple structure that you can use, whether you've got 5 minutes to prepare, 50 minutes, or 5 days. It doesn't matter. So you can expand this, you can contract this for the amount of time that you're speaking, but you can also use it when you've got lots of time to prepare and no time to prepare at all. It is so simple. It's got 3 parts to it. And the initials EEG help you remember the structure. E, engage. E, the second E, is educate, explain, and give examples. And the G is galvanize. And the galvanize means so what, what's next, and timeframes and dependencies. So let me talk you through each of those areas. So engage. When we begin to speak, whether we're doing a TED Talk, whether we're doing a presentation, whether we're doing an off-the-cuff speech, we need to gather the audience's attention pretty quickly. So at the beginning of my talk today, I said, if I lead you into a room and turn the lights out and said, okay, trust me, that's not going to feel great for you. So hopefully I engaged you with that image because you were like, oh yeah, I wouldn't like that. I want to know how I can engage my audience. So we need to engage our listeners very quickly. Tell them why this is relevant, what they're going to learn, and maybe even how long you're going to talk for, so that they are completely hooked in. Don't start with the practicalities because that's not so interesting. Hi, I'm Emma. I'm going to talk for 5 minutes. Who cares? So start with the thing that will really capture your audience's attention. So an interesting statistic, a hook, a story, anything that's going to gather your audience and help them understand why they should keep listening for the next 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it might be. Then the second part is educate. So give them the information that they need to know, but only the information that they need to know. So if you're talking for 15 minutes, no more than 3 points. Absolutely no more than 3 points. Less if you can. Educate your audience. Give them the information that they need. Explain what that means and why it's relevant. Why should they care? And then give examples or case studies or data if you've got it, just to support. You want that evidence to support your information. Then once you've done that, it just means that the audience knows they can go away with these 3 points. Yeah. So why, in my instance today, we've looked at why you need structure, why your audience needs structure, and what that structure is. And then my structure actually has 3 points as well. So we've got this lovely repetition, this motif of 3. So once you've done that, once you've given your audience what they need to know, the final part of your structure is about galvanizing. It's about what needs to happen next. So what? I've given you this information about structure. So what do you do with it? So next time you've got to plan for a presentation, you've got the structure. Just write it down. EEG. What do I need to do to engage my audience? What do I need to do to educate them with? What do they need to know? What examples have I got? How can I explain this? How can I use metaphor that's going to help them understand this thing if it's complex or it requires imagery? So how do I explain it to them? How do I use examples? And then galvanize. What do I need them to do? So what? As we just explained. What's next? So what needs to happen now? What needs to happen when you finish listening to this video? What needs to happen when you finish for your audience? What do you need your audience to do when you finish speaking? Make a decision, change a behavior, feel inspired to do X. What is it you want them to do? So it's a bit like a call to action, but you're galvanizing them to do something. So they need to understand the so what, then they need to understand what's next, what they need to do. And then if you need to, you can give them some time frames and some dependencies. So by the end of the day, by the end of next week, or if X happens, then that's when we will implement this project, or when Y happens, that's when we will stop doing X. So give them some time frames and dependencies if that is relevant to their decision making or to what you need them to do when they leave that room. So let's just summarize what we've talked about today. Don't leave audiences in the dark. They hate it. Hate it. It makes us feel really, really unsafe. If you put yourself in their shoes, you don't want to feel unsafe or where you're not sure where things are going when somebody is talking to you. So you need a structure. As a speaker, you need a structure because number one, it is going to reduce your preparation time. It's going to make sure the right content is in there and it's consumable by your audience. Number two, it's going to help you be clear and concise. It's going to reduce your personal sense of overwhelm and the overwhelm of the audience, and increases the chance that your message is actually going to land. And number 3, it gives you a roadmap. It's easier for you to remember, it's easier for you to deliver, and it's so much easier for the audience to follow and feel safe in your hands. It also encourages you to lean into your expertise. And this is really, really, really important, right? If you lean into your expertise, because you don't have everything written on a slide, you don't have 150 slides, you don't have every graph, every statistic written up there. So you will need to lean into the fact that you know this stuff. This is your area of expertise. And you don't need it written down in your notes, and you don't need it written on a slide to know it. So this really helps you lean into that. And the more that you trust yourself, the more that's going to show up to your audience, and the more they will trust you. And that's really, really important. So why do your audience need you to use structure? Right? They want to know where they're going, because if they know where you're going and how long it's going to take to get there and all the things they're likely to see along the way, they will feel safe, so they listen. If you use a structure, your audience will raise their trust in you, right? And that feels good for them. It feels good for you. And guess what? They listen. If we are respectful of their time, it increases their sense of your credibility and your competence. And we can only be respectful of time if we've got a structure. And guess what? They listen. Do you notice a theme? It's really, really, really important. The more safe your audience feel, the more they're going to listen. The more they trust you, the more they're going to listen. The more competent you look and sound, the more they listen. Structure, if you have it and you use it, it will help your audience do all of those things. Feel safe, trust you, and their sort of sense of perceived competence raises inexplicably. So it's really important that you use structure, because it helps them trust you and listen to you. And then if they listen to you, guess what? It means your message has a greater chance of actually landing. Then once you've done all of that, you need to galvanize them into action, right? We're all suffering from decision fatigue. So tell your audience what needs to happen next and why it's important. That's that so what piece. So what is important about this? What needs to happen next? And how can they assist you in the process? And if you need to, talk about timeframes and contingencies. So today we have talked about what you need to do, what structure you need to use to make sure that you're saving time, that you're galvanizing people's actions after you've finished speaking, and that they're really, really, really listening to you. But it's only one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is how you show up. So how you show up means what your voice sounds like, what your body language is doing, how you're showing up to speak to your audience. Because you can have a beautifully crafted message, beautifully crafted. The structure's perfect. But if it's poorly delivered, it isn't going to land with the same credibility that if it's delivered in a really expert, competent way. So once you have used your structure, you know exactly what you're going to say. Take some time. Make sure you do this well in advance and take some time so that you can think about how you're going to show up, how you're going to stand, how you're going to breathe, how you're going to speak, so that your message has the greatest chance of landing with your audience, because it's beautifully constructed and it is beautifully delivered as well. So we're all about the practical over here. We want to help you use structure whenever you can. So we've created a template, a one-page template where you can prepare using this structure your content really quickly, really easily. You can use it over and over and over again. Obviously, it's a template, and it will help you save time, build trust, and demonstrate your competence every single time you speak. So if you want that, DM me. I will send it to you straight away. It's totally free. I want you to get out there and I want you to be using this structure, because it is going to make such an impact on how you are perceived every single time that you speak. I trust that you found that useful today. Let me know in the comments what you liked, what made sense to you, what you want to know more about. Take care and we will speak really soon. Bye for now.